So my friend Pedro released like a week or two ago, and I thought I'd give my thoughts on it since it's a game I've been interested in for a while. Ever since I saw the first couple trailers, it grabbed my interest, because as you all know, I'm a sucker for bullet time shooters. Originally the game started out as a Flash game, and then over the course of a 4.5 year development cycle, the game finally released. What's amazing is that this game was developed by just one person, Victor Argan, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly.
Did you do the entirety of My Friend Pedro on your own?
Everything apart from the music.
Everything apart from the music?
Yeah.
Anyway, the game has now sold over 250,000 copies in its first week, which is great for an indie game. So how about we take a look at it? So My Friend Pedro starts off with a banana named Pedro, waking up the nameless main character we play as. They're in a basement and they need to get out. Eventually the protagonist gets a pistol and comes across Mike the Butcher. This section is a slight tutorial and it works quite well. At first you just go around shooting dudes in the face, but then Pedro gives you bullet time and it's awesome. I do also like the visual style for the game. There is some nice contrast between pink and blues, and the main character has a very recognizable and iconic design. Anyway, let's get into the meat of the game, the gameplay. So My Friend Pedro is a side-scrolling bullet time shooter, and it's glorious. The game is pretty simple. There are a couple types of guns like pistols and SMGs which can be dual wielded, and you can do split aims which is really cool and reminds me of Wet, which is one of my favourite games, so that's a good thing. The pistol has unlimited ammo, but the SMG does more damage and has a faster fire rate, so there's reason to switch between the guns. There's also a shotgun which does a devastating amount of damage. In fact, pretty much every time you use it, a couple limbs will come off the enemy, which makes me wonder how this game got rated T for teen. Anyway, it's a really fun gun to use. There's also this assault rifle which does a burst fire and also has a grenade launcher. It's really fun, especially against a group of enemies. And finally, there's a sniper rifle which does quite a bit of damage and also gives you a laser sight to help you tell where your bullets are going to hit. You can also do an awesome kick, which is useful and looks awesome. All the weapons are awesome and serve a purpose, and they're very useful as well. The game also does have this feature where you can dodge bullets by pressing W. It's helpful, but the drawback of it is that you won't be able to aim where you want to while you're doing it. I do think in some sections the player can easily abuse this feature, but for the most part it's fairly well balanced. There are also some cool parkour elements to the gameplay, which can be used on both enemies, but there are also some levels that are just parkour platforming. The game will actually give you more points for using more parkour and for using more creative kills, such as split kills, dodge kills, wall jump kills, rope kills, and using objects to kill enemies, like knives, skateboards, ricocheting bullets off of frying pans, or kicking a body part into another enemy to kill them. It's nice that the game rewards more creative skills. The level design overall is great, and it works well for creative playstyles. And what I do like is that on some levels there are different paths to take, and the game allows you to experiment and try out new methods. On each playthrough there may be similarities, but the majority of the game will be different each time you play, and there are many different ways to play through each level.
First Seed was the whole thing of puppeteering and like making the player feel like they're doing the cool thing, rather than playing a cool animation.
Ultimately, I don't have any major complaints with My Friend Pedro. There are some levels that I feel can be a bit unfair, but generally the game is well balanced. I played on hard mode for my first playthrough, and it felt really challenging, but whenever I died, most of the time it was my fault, so the balancing is pretty good. I guess some of the platforming levels can go on for a bit too long and get kinda boring. Some of the boss fights are kinda meh, but that's about it in terms of problems. Right now I'm trying to get an S rank on all the levels, and it is frustrating, but man is it satisfying to get an S rank on a level, and the satisfaction more than makes up for the frustration. Not only do the guns have variety, but so do the levels too. There are some levels where you'll be swinging ropes across buildings and cranes while killing enemies. There'll be some where you're riding a skateboard and shooting down some bad guys. There's a motorcycle chase and it's really awesome. There's a freefall level, there's a train level, and much more. There's a lot of great variety here. Overall the game took me around 4 hours to beat, but it's only £15 anyway, and it's a blast from beginning to end, and I was never bored. My Friend Pedro's gameplay is really solid and it's really fun. It's brutal and it rewards creativity. It's one of the few games to release in recent years that I would actually call a masterpiece. Now, there isn't really much to the story in this game, but I thought I'd talk about it anyway, bearing in mind there will be spoilers for this story section. Now, throughout My Friend Pedro, you're an anti-hero taking down a major crime family, and that's the story for most of the game, which is fine because not every game has to have a deep and complex plot. The plot in this game is mainly just there to give context to what the player is doing, and also to connect the levels and make them go from point A to point B. At the end of the game, it is revealed that the crime family is actually your family, and that the main character was sick of all the bad stuff they did, so he knocked himself out and erased his memory while Pedro told him what to do, all the while wearing a mask to avoid people recognizing him. He also asked Pedro to kill him once this was done. So the final boss fight is Pedro, and it's one of the weirdest boss fights I've had in years. After beating Pedro, the main character takes off his mask to reveal his face. Now this scene is funny, but it's also kind of confusing, but I do have a theory about it. My theory is that Pedro isn't actually real, and is actually just an extension of your imagination, and the main character is actually Pedro, which would explain why he has Pedro's face at the end. It also would make sense since Pedro nearly tries to take you over and nearly makes you commit suicide. Basically, Pedro is just a hallucination caused by the main character knocking himself out, which made him lose his memory, and it also made him experience hallucinations. Basically, when he knocked himself out, he experienced brain damage and is now suffering from schizophrenia, and is instead mistaking his real self, Pedro, for a banana. Pedro is basically supposed to be a reflection of who the main character actually is. Either way, it's not a deep story, but it is enough to keep you going throughout, and the ending is pretty ambiguous. Now, I have to mention the soundtrack in this game. It's fucking awesome. It has a nice mix of synthwave and dark techno EDM stuff. It's great, and really enhances the gameplay. I've listened to the entire soundtrack of this game, and I love all the tracks, but for the sake of time, I'll only display my 5 favorites. Honestly, it's one of my favourite soundtracks of any bullet time shooter. So in the end, My Friend Pedro is a goddamn masterpiece. It has creative and satisfying gameplay that rewards creative play, and the soundtrack is dope as fuck. Go out and buy this game right now if you haven't already. It's the best cocaine binge you'll ever have. And to Victor, the developer, your game is awesome, and I think all the hard work you've put into it over the 4 years has really paid off. I am extremely excited to see what you do next, and good luck.